We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi Gemara in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 25b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara was searching for the Tana which holds that the Shichva Zera of a Zav is Metame not only b'maga, not only when it touches something, but also b'masa when it's carried. And the Gemara brings this Mishnah in Kalim. The Mishnah in Kalim says that the level above things which are only Tame b'maga would be Zovo Shel Zav, would be again the flow, the emission of a Zav, V'roko and his spit, V'shichva Zaro and his Shichva Zera, Umeme Raglav and his urine, V'dam Hanida and the blood of a Nida, Metamin Bein b'maga, Bein b'masa. Those are Tame, both b'maga and b'masa. And so you see clearly over here in this Mishnah that the Shichva Zera of a Zav is Metame b'masa, so we have found the Tana that holds like that. But the Gemara says, but here also, maybe it's the same as what we said on the previous Amud. Maybe over here, the Shichva Zera is not Metame b'masa on its own, but it's Metame b'masa because we say that it's impossible that there isn't some Ziva, there must be some discharge of Ziva that's mixed within the Shichva Zera, and maybe that's why it's Tame b'masa. But the Gemara says, no, Imkain, because if that were the case, that we're saying the Shichva Zera has within it the Ziva, so listening agabe Zovo, it should have been next to the words Zovo Shel Zav, you should have had Shichva Zera. Ma'ishna de katani lagabe roko. Why is it that it's listed next to roko, next to the spit? Elamishum de'asi me roko. Rather, it must be that it's learned out from rok. That was the kal v'chomer that we had on the previous Amud, and that's why it says it next to roko, next to the spit of the zav. And so therefore, again, we see the Shichva Zera of the zav, according to this Tana, is in fact Tameh b'masa. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravacha mi Difti le Ravina. Ravacha from Difti said to Ravina, V'hai Tana, but what about the following Tana? Lo darish dayo. This Tana is going to ignore the rule of dayo. V'yafagav de lo mifrach kal v'chomer, even though it's a situation where the kal v'chomer is not refuted, meaning the kal v'chomer works perfectly well without ignoring the rule of dayo, and still this Tana is going to ignore the rule of dayo. That goes against what we said on the previous Amud, because we said on the previous Amud that every Tana should agree to the rule of dayo, at least in some situations. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, mapots b'meis minayin. How do we know a thick mat is tamei b'meis? Meaning to say, let's say it's in the oel ames, let's say it's underneath the same oel that a dead body is in. So how do we know that it gets that tumas meis? V'din, who we make the following kal v'chomer. Uma pachin ketanim, if when it comes to small vessels, shetahorim bezav, those are tar. When it comes to a zav, metame b'meis, those are able to get tumas meis. If they're in the oel ames, they become tamei. So mapots shemetame bezav, a mapots which is tamei by a zav, and din she'etame b'meis. Isn't it true that it should also have tumas meis? And so the Gemara says, "V'kamaisi la bein l'tumas erev, bein l'tumas shiva." We're using this kal v'chomer over here to say that the mapitz is tummy not only for tumas erev, not only for the tumah for 1 day, but even for the tumah for 7 days. And so the Gemara says, "V'yamai." Why do we do that? It seems that we're ignoring the rule of dayo. Ema hani kal v'chomer l'tumas erev. What we should say is that the kal v'chomer works in order to make a tummy for 1 day. V'yahani dayo la'afuke tumas shiva. But we should employ the rule of dayo to say that the kal v'chomer cannot go beyond the original source, and therefore we should say that there's no tumas shiva. So over here it seems that this Tana is ignoring dayo. And the Gemara says, Amar Le, so he said back to him, Kvar Rama Nihile Rav Nachman bar Zachariah La'Abaya. Rav Nachman bar Zachariah already set this kal v'chomer, stated this kal v'chomer in front of Abaya. V'Amar Le Abaya, and Abaya said back to him, Tana mi mapotz b'sheretz ma'isila. You're actually incorrect. The Tana over here is really learning out from mapotz by sheretz. V'Achi Kamar, the real limud is as follows: mapotz b'sheretz minayin. How do we know that a mapotz, a thick mat, is tummy when it comes to tumas sheretz? V'dinu, it's the following kal v'chomer. Uma pachin ketanim shetahorim bezav. If when it comes to small vessels which are pure by a zav, tamein b'sheretz, they're tumah if they're tummy if they touch a sheretz. Mapotz shetame bezav. So when it comes to a thick mat which is tummy by a zav, eno din she tummy b'sheretz. Certainly it should be tummy if it touches a sheretz. And lamapotz b'meis minayin. And so therefore, how do we now make the leap? Where do we know that by mapotz there's going to be tumas meis as well? That's not learned from a kal v'chomer like we said above. Rather, it's the following gzeira shava. Nemar beged v'or b'sheretz. It says the words beged and or by a sheretz. V'nemar beged v'or b'meis. It also uses the words beged and or when it comes to a mace. Ma beged v'or ha'amr b'sheretz mapotz tamei bo. Just like the beged and the or that are stated by a sheretz, we know a mapotz is tamei. Af beged v'or ha'amr b'meis mapotz tamei bo. So too when it comes to the beged and or, it says the same words by tumas meis. We understand that to include even the mapotz, even the thick mat is going to be tamei. Therefore, we're not learning it from a kal v'chomer. We're not ignoring the rule of dayo, and it no longer presents a problem because we're really learning it from a gzeira shava from sheretz. And Rashi explains mapotz b'meis minayin. Where do we know that a thick mat is tamei when it comes to meis? mace. Shemetame, how do we know that it becomes tummy again if it's in the oel mace? Lefi shenemar b'mace gabe midyon v'chol beged v'chol klior v'gomer. It does mention various vessels and garments that become tummy mace. However, v'ze'ino lo bechlal beged v'lo bechlal or. The problem over here is that a mapatz is not counted as a beged, it's not counted as or. V'lo bechlal klietz, it's not counted as wooden vessels. Minayin shafilu metame bo'al mace. So that's why the Bryce is asking, how do we know that that also is tummy if it's in the oel mace? And so initially the Gemara brought it from pachin ketanim to horim bezav. So initially the Gemara said, if when it comes to pachin ketanim, which are small vessels that they are tar by a zav, but they are tamei mace, so a maputz which is tamei bezav certainly should be tamei mace, meaning to say again, when it comes to the pachin ketanim by a zav, bechol tumosav, any kinds of tumah that the zav has that doesn't apply to the pachin ketanim. What's the idea? The kli cheres ein metame ela me'aviro, because pachin ketanim refers to kli cheres, which are earthenware vessels. The halach is that only from the inside, only from inside the airspace, they can become tamei. Umitoch shepiv shalot tsar, and the point over here is, since it's a very small vessel, the opening is very small, very narrow. Eno yochel lahachnes etzbo lesochu. It's so small that the zav can't stick his finger inside it. Ulemedris nami lo chazyu veheset nami lahachi afke rachmana leheset kli cheres bezav beloshen maga. And also when it comes to tumas medris, tumas hesed, all the other kinds of tumah that could apply, they don't apply over here. That's why it is that the Torah uses beloshen maga. The Torah uses it as a language of touching. It uses the language of touching to say that all kinds of tumah don't apply. So even though a zav is able to be metame things by lifting them up, by carrying them, but if it's not possible for the item to become tummy through tumas maga, then we say it's also not possible for it to become tummy through tumas hesed as well, and therefore it comes out that pachin ketanim are never going to be tummy when it comes to a zav. But nevertheless, metame be'ol hameis. But nevertheless, these pachin ketanim which can never become tummy from a zav are tummy if they're in the oel hameis. Tichsiv v'chol kli pasuach v'gomer. It says any open vessel ve'ezehu kli shetumaso kodemes lepischo haviomer zeh kli cheres. Where do we find a type of vessel where the tumah precedes the opening? That's like kli cheres. Uchsiv tamehu va'afilu piv tzar. It says it's tummy even with a narrow opening. Harehu roi lahal olav. So you see, there is a possibility of tumas oel when it comes to these pachin ketanim. So maputz shemetami bezav. So a maputz which is a thick mat, which certainly is tummy with a zav, shoroi lemishkav, because he's able to lie down upon it. Uchsiv hamishkav asher yishkav. It says anything the zav lies down upon is going to be tummy, and so therefore we say that maputz is going to be tummy mace as well. V'kamaisi le maputz shei tummy b'meis zayin yomim keshar kelim shaboel hameis. And what are we saying over here? We're using this kal v'chomer to say that the maputz is tummy for 7 days. Why do we do that? Lahani dayo lemuute mitumas shivat. Shouldn't we employ the rule of dayo to limit the kal v'chomer and say it doesn't go beyond the source? Because what is the source? Because when a zav creates tumah by lying on something, that's only going to be until the evening. It's only going to be a 1-day tumah. And yet we're saying since a zav is able to make a mapatz tameh, so therefore the mapatz also has tumas mace for 7 days. It seems like we're ignoring the rule of dayo. And Rashi continues, Tanami mapatz b'sheretz ma'isile. Actually, the Tana is not learning out from tumas erev of zav. Rather, the Tana is learning out from a gzeira shava of mapatz by sheretz, mapatz b'meis of gzeira shava. Again, you're learning out the fact that a maputz is tamei in the oel hameis from maputz b'sheretz through a gzeira shava. Kidul kaman, as we'll say later on, nemar beged v'or, it's a gzeira shava from the words beged and or. V'lab b'kal v'chomer mizav kedam, it's not a kal v'chomer from zav. V'hach mishnah hachikamar maputz b'sheretz minale. Really, the Mishnah was trying to derive maputz by sheretz, and then they're going to use a gzeira shava in terms of maputz by mace. V'izdagar sitana maputz b'sheretz maisi. Some have a different gear so that the Tana is learning out maputz and sheretz. Kilomer v'haitana maputz b'sheretz hu demaisi b'kal v'chomer. It's the same idea. The point is the Tana is learning maputz of sheretz through a kal v'chomer mizav from zav. V'latumas erev, that's just for tumas erev. V'lo maputz b'meis. The point is we're not learning maputz b'meis from the tumah from the tumah by zav. And Rashi continues tamei b'sheretz when it comes to pachim ketanim. They're tamei with a sheretz. The sheretz metame b'chadosha because the sheretz is metame even at the size of a lentil. V'roi hu likones b'pi pach katan, so it's able to enter into this small opening of the small vessel. And so again we learn out from there that maputz as well is tamei from a sheretz. And the Gemara continues, mufna, if you're making this gzeira shava that it says beged and or by sheretz and it says beged and or by mace, it has to be mufna. Mufna means to say that these words are extra. The ilo mufna, because if these words are not extra, when you make a gzeira shava from words that are not extra, ikal mifrach, so then you're able to refute the gzeira shava as long as there's any logical refutation. and the refutation would be as follows. How can you learn out from sheretz? Because sheretz, as we just said, is metame even at the size of a lentil. Tomar b'meis shein metame b'chadasha ela b'kazayis, whereas by a mace, the tumah is not at the size of a lentil, it's only at the size of a kazayis, and so therefore you wouldn't really be able to make a gzeira shaveh from the case of sheretz, maputz by sheretz, to the case of maputz by mace, because of this refutation, unless we say that these words are free. And the Gemara says, La'ayaf nuye mufna. So where do we find that the words are free? It's beged and or by sheretz, and it also says beged and or by mace. And the Gemara explains, Michti, let us see. Sheretz iskish l'shichva zera. We know that sheretz is compared to shichva zera. T'chsiv, as it's written in the pasuk, Oisha sher teitze v'gomer, talks about shichva zera in that pasuk. V'samach le, and then right next to that pasuk it says, Oisha sher yiga b'chol sheretz. It talks about sheretz. Uchsib be b'shichva zera. And what does it say by shichva zera? It already says, V'chol beged v'chol or asher yeh alav shichva zera. It talks about a beged or talks about a garment or a garment of leather that has upon it shichva zera, and so therefore it already says beged and or by shichva zera, which is already compared to sheretz. So beged v'or, the cause of rachmana b'sheretz lamali. So why does it need to say the words beged and or by sheretz as well? It already essentially says that through the comparison to shichva zera. Shma mino lafnuye. So you see that these words are now free. So indeed, at least the beged and the or that are written by sheretz, those are free words for this gezeira shaveh. But the Gemara says vakati, but still mufna mitzad echaru, that's only free from one side. What about the beged and or by mace? Are those free as well? Hanichulaman damar mufna mitzad echad l'meidin vein meshivin shaper. This works according to the one who says that if you have a gzeira shaveh where one side is free, you can learn that gzeira shaveh and you can't bring refutations. El laman damar l'meidin umeshivin. But according to the man damar who says that if it's free only on one side, that's not enough, you can still refute such a gzeira shaveh. Ma'ikol amemar, what are you going to say? And to that the Gemara says, the mace nami afnuye mufna. No, when it says beged and or by mace as well, that's also free words, because michdi, let us see, mace iskish l'shechva zera, mace also is compared to shechva zera. Because it's written in the pasuk, v'hanogea b'chol t'mei nefesh, oish asher teitzim mimenu v'gomer. Again, the pasuk talks about shechva zera, and it also talks about t'mei nefesh. So you see there's a comparison. Uchsib be b'shechva zera v'chol beged v'chol or asher yeh olav shechva zera. And again, it says beged and or by shechva zera. So beged v'yor, the kasav rachmana b'meis lamali. Why does it need to say the words beged and or by mace? Shma mino lafnuye. So you see again that those are free words. So now it's free from both sides. You can make a gezeira shaveh again between this case of maputz by mace and the case of maputz when it comes to sheretz. Just like by the sheretz we say tameh, so too by the mace we're going to say that the maputz is tameh if it's in the yoel mace. But the Gemara continues, but that only works according to the one who says don mina v'uki bi'asra, that when you do a gezeira shaveh, so you learn from a source, but then you apply it in the context where you are applying it. So in other words, the source over here is maputz by sheretz, that's a one-day tumah. Then you apply the gzeira shaveh to maputz by mace, and in general, mace is a 7-day tumah, so you learn out a 7-day tumah. Al-laman damar don mina, but the one who says that when you learn a gzeira shaveh, it has to be from the source itself. So maputz, again, when it comes to maputz by sheretz, that's just a 1-day tumah, and you have to learn everything from there. It's essentially similar to the dayo restriction. You can't go beyond the source if you don mina. So ma'ikol amemar. So then what are you going to say? We still don't really have a source that when it comes to maputz by mace that it should be 7 days. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, Amar Krotz, because the pasuk says, V'chibastem b'gdeichem bayom hashvi, you're going to wash your clothing on the 7th day. And we learn from there, kol tumos sha'atem metamin b'mace, any kinds of tumah by mace, lo yehu pechusin mishava, they can never be less than 7 days. And Rashi explains, "V'chibastem b'gdeichem v'gomer." We learn out from the pasuk of "V'chibastem u'gzeres hakasuv," that it's a gzeres hakasuv to lo amrinan bei don mino. That when it comes to tumas mace, we don't say don mino. We don't restrict the gzeres shaveh, and we say that when it comes again to tumas mace, it can't be less than 7 days. And the Gemara continues with Shein v'regel chayev b'rishos harabim. The Gemara now asks, when it comes to Shein v'regel, of course we said Shein and regel are patur in rishos harabim, but why don't we say that Shein and regel are chayev in rishos harabim? Mikal v'chomer. Why don't we make the following kal v'chomer? Uma karen shebrishos hanizik einu meshalem el chatzi nezik. If karen in the rishos hanizik, not according to Rabbi Tarfon, the payment is only chatzi nezik, b'rishos harabim chayeves, and rishos harabim is also chayev. So Shein v'regel shebrishos hanizik meshalem nezik shalem. Shein and regel, which in the rishos hanizik pay nezik shalem. Eino din shebrishos harabim chayev. Certainly in rishos harabim, Shein and regel should also be chayev. And the Gemara says to that, Omar Kra, no, it's because the pasuk says ubir b'steyacher, that it has to go and consume in another person's field. V'lo b'rishos harabim, we learn out from there that it has to be in another person's field in the rishos hanizik and not in the rishos harabim. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chavav Amud Aleph.